Hello and welcome to Uncensored. This is Season 1, Episode 2. My name is Gary Series and I'm your host. Today we're going to be talking about my final predictions for the election of 2024. And then we'll have one more political episode, and that's going to be on the actual election results. After that, we're going to talk about some history and we're going to talk about some relationships on additional episodes to come in this season. But this is going to be a three-parter. So we've already had part one. This is going to be part two on where I think the election is headed. So without further ado, for those of you that are either watching on Facebook or on YouTube, you'll be able to see the map. For everybody else, I will explain where I'm at for what I think we're going to be seeing in this election. So right now, what I have as projection is I see a 347 vote margin for President Trump to a 191 margin for Kamala Harris in the Electoral College. And we're going to go by state, and we're going to also point out what to look for on election night to see how things are going. Right now, my margin is a lot higher than you're going to see on some of the aggregates because I believe that they're lagging. They're including polls such as Morning Consult and Bloomberg, which are very left-leaning polls and have been historically very, very off when it comes to election results. For instance, some of these polling firms have been off by as much as 10 points in both 2016 and 2020. That includes some of the major swing states such as Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Minnesota. Now, my map, as you can see, if you're online, includes some new swing states. And I believe that this election is going to be an overwhelming victory in the Electoral College for Trump, no matter what the actual result is in the popular vote. Right now, I think Trump is probably on track to win the popular vote by about 1% to as low as 0.5%. I don't think he can get much higher than that. There is a ceiling on Trump's support because there is a lot of anti-Trump vote out there. However, Kamala Harris has failed abysmally to really elevate the Democratic base to where it needs to be. At this point, she is shredding the base. So there is a massive move away from the Democratic Party, particularly among Latino and Black men. And in key battleground states, that's going to be the margin of victory. And this does not even mean that they're going to necessarily vote for Trump. It means that they're not going to turn out to vote. However, those that do turn out, I think there's going to be a record amount of the Black vote and the Latino vote and Asian vote for President Trump. We already know what President Trump has done as president. Kamala Harris, at this point, is almost a laughingstock, and the Democratic Party has actually been talking behind the scenes about how President Biden would actually maybe have done a little bit better had they kept him in. But they chose not to, and they chose to go with Kamala. So on my map, I have moved several of the swing states out of the swing state category and into safe Republican territory. Now, those include North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. I believe that those states are completely out of the reach of Kamala Harris at this point. Polling has consistently showed Trump up from anywhere from 0.8% in North Carolina on the aggregate, all the way up to about 2.4% in Arizona. Now, you have to keep in mind that these include some polling in the Real Clear Politics aggregate, as well as the 538 aggregate, that have been very, very off in past elections, including Quinnipiac, including Morning Consult, including Bloomberg. But some of the more reputable and more on target, such as Emerson polling, such as Atlas Intel, such as the New York Times Siena polls, are right on target for where I think this election is going to be. I think Trump is probably going to win Georgia by about 5 points. He's probably going to win Arizona by about 6 points. And he's probably going to win North Carolina anywhere from 2 to 3 points. It won't be much more in North Carolina. And the reason why North Carolina is going to have a lower margin than the other two, which Biden actually carried in 2020 and Trump carried North Carolina in 2020, is because Mark Robinson is running for governor at the top of the GOP ticket here in North Carolina, where I happen to live. And Mark Robinson has run a terrible campaign. He has said some really things you don't say on the campaign trail, and he has been portrayed successfully by the Democrats as an extremist. So you're going to see a lot of crossover votes from Republicans that vote for Trump but vote against Mark Robinson. But you're also going to see some people turned off so much by Mark Robinson that they're going to actually vote for Kamala Harris. But there is no way that Kamala Harris can carry North Carolina at this point in time. The vote in North Carolina, because of the way that FEMA handled the hurricane, is going to be overwhelmingly Republican in the rural areas. You're also going to see some movement towards Trump, not significant, but enough to keep Kamala's margins down in some of the urban areas. That includes the Asheville urban area, and Asheville is probably the most liberal city in all of North Carolina. However, Asheville citizens and residents are very fed up with the response of the Kamala Biden Harris and the response to the hurricane. And also, you're going to see some movement in the Wilmington area, where there has been a significant growth in the Brunswick County. There's been significant growth in Pender County, which are suburban counties outside of New Hanover County, where Wilmington exists. And Wilmington and New Hanover County is a swing county. This is the biggest county to watch on election night. So if you see that Kamala Harris is winning in New Hanover County by, say, 3 to 4 points throughout the night, there is a chance that Trump's margin is going to be very small, more on the tune of 50,000 to 60,000 votes statewide. However, if Trump carries New Hanover County like he did in 2016 and he's ahead throughout the night, look for a comfortable 2 to 3 point victory for Trump in North Carolina. Now, I'm not even going to get into Georgia and Arizona counties because I think they're completely out of reach for Kamala Harris at this point in time. I also think a significant thing to note here is that on my map, I have Florida as a solid Republican state, as well as Texas. Now, Texas underperformed for Trump in 2020. The polls actually had Biden, some of them had him ahead, but nobody really believed that. Everybody thought Trump would carry Texas comfortably. He did not. He carried it by 5 points, which you would think is comfortable. However, in past elections, Texas has been much more Republican. In this election, I fully expect Trump to carry Texas by double digits. Florida is no longer a swing state. It was proven because in 2016, Trump eked out a 1.4% victory in Florida. Florida was one of just 15 states, though, in 2020, which swung even further towards Trump. And he carried the state by 3.3 points, despite every poll showing that he was going to be beaten by Biden by about 3 to 4 points. Right now, polling has him up by as much as 8 to 10 points in Florida. I believe that in the end, Florida will wind up 12 to 13 points for Trump. It will be the largest victory for a Republican or Democrat in the state of Florida since the 1984 election, where Ronald Reagan had his landslide victory for re-election. The next state I want to look at is Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is what many people say is the key to the election. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think that it is the key to the election for Kamala Harris. Now, if she loses Pennsylvania, there is literally no path to victory for Kamala. However, I do believe that Trump can lose Pennsylvania. And I'm also going to point out how I believe he can also lose Michigan and Wisconsin and still be elected. There are many more paths for Trump to victory than there are for Kamala. And Pennsylvania has to be won by Kamala Harris. But I do think it is likely to go for the Republicans. And I think the margin is going to be about 4 points. Now, Trump carried Pennsylvania barely by about 90,000 votes or so. I'm sorry, 69,000 votes or so in 2016. Biden's flipped that and won by a pretty similar margin, but I think it was 0.8% or 1.2% in Pennsylvania in 2020. However, polling now is swung strongly in favor of Trump. Most polling has him up or tied, or Harris only up by 1 or 2 points. And again, the aggregates are including garbage polls like Morning Consult and like Quinnipiac, which I don't believe should be looked at in any way, shape, or form, as they have not been consistently right in the past 5 or 6 elections, to be honest. Now, Pennsylvania is also slipping away for several other reasons. In the Philadelphia area, you're going to see a significant number of Black men vote for the Republican candidate, Donald Trump. And when I say significant numbers, I'm not talking even in the 40% range. That's just unrealistic. But I think you're going to see a 15 to 16 percentage for Donald Trump in Philadelphia and the Philadelphia suburbs among Black men. This is going to swing the election heavily in Trump's favor. In 2020, I believe that Biden carried 91% of Black males. If Kamala is only able to carry 82 or 81% of Black males, you're talking about 100,000 votes. That is more than the margin that Biden won the state of Pennsylvania in 2020. There's also some other counties that are going to swing back towards Trump that swung away from him in 2020. In 2016, Trump narrowly carried Erie County, which I believe is the only county we really need to look at in the entire state of Pennsylvania to know how the election is going to go. So if Kamala is up by 5 to 6% on election night in Erie County, Trump may only carry Pennsylvania by about 25 to 50,000 votes. However, if Trump is tied or ahead in Erie County, I think you're going to see the state of Pennsylvania go 4 to 5% for Trump. There is the possibility that Pennsylvania swings more towards Trump than North Carolina, which I have solid on the map. But there's also that possibility, like I said, because polling is very difficult in Pennsylvania, because outside of the Philadelphia area, you have a very mixed population, especially around the Pittsburgh suburbs. That's why Erie is so important. Erie is about evenly split right now between Republicans, Democrats, and independents. So if the independents swing towards Trump in Erie, you're going to see a massive victory for Trump in Pennsylvania on the order of 150,000 to 250,000 votes. Next, we're going to move on to Michigan. I believe Michigan is now pretty much not winnable by Kamala Harris. Now, you will hear once again from every pundit out there that Michigan is the most liberal of the Rust Belt states, that yes, Joe Biden won it significantly with 156,000 votes in 2020, and Trump barely won it in 2016 with about 10,000 votes. However, there are significant and I believe lasting moves in Michigan, particularly among the Arab American community. Polling among Arab Americans has gone from about 18% support for Republican candidates and for Republican Donald Trump in 2020 to a majority of around 52 to 54% for Trump. Michigan has the largest Arab American and Muslim population percentage-wise in the United States. These voters are going to swing the election to Trump. There's also going to be a significant change in the amount of bleeding among the African American vote in the Detroit area, particularly among Black males. And I believe that in this area, in particular, it's going to be a much higher percentage than in Pennsylvania. I believe it's going to be between 25 and 30%. The crime in Detroit is simply out of control. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has been a disaster for the state of Michigan, and people are not going to forget that. Let's move next door now to Wisconsin. Wisconsin, I also believe, is out of reach for Kamala Harris at this point. Joe Biden barely won Wisconsin by 0.2%. The polls had him up by as much as 7 to 8% in Wisconsin. So the polling error in Wisconsin is much higher than in other states. This is significant because right now, Trump is actually ahead in the polls by 0.2. So if we have the same polling error that we had in 2020, you're looking at a 6 to 7% victory for Trump statewide. And I think that that is very much in the realm of possibility. I do think that we have to watch Dane County. If Dane County, where Madison, the capital, comes in with a high turnout, it's going to be a much closer race because Dane County is the most liberal county in Wisconsin. Typically goes between 70 and 80% Republican. It's also one of the largest counties, along with Milwaukee. Milwaukee, though, has had a declining turnout election over election, and its importance statewide has been receding. We're looking at the cities of Kenosha and Racine, where you have a Republican trend due to crime rates increasing in the state of Wisconsin. So you're going to look at a margin there where Trump is probably going to win those areas by about 3 to 4 points. But the big news is going to be Western Wisconsin. Western Wisconsin has already flipped red. However, it's getting redder with each additional election. Now that Iowa is simply out of reach for any Democratic candidate, it has become probably one of the most Republican states in the country, along with Ohio, both of which used to be very swingy states, but no longer are. They're now safe Republican states. Western Wisconsin has more culturally in common with Iowa than it does with the rest of the Rust Belt. It has more culturally with Iowa than it does with Illinois. So Wisconsin is going to be determined, like I said, by the turnout in Dane County, but more so by the absolute Republican tidal wave in Western Wisconsin. I think you could see upwards of 80 to 85% in some counties in Western Wisconsin. And I think any remaining Democratic counties in Western Wisconsin are going to flip this election. So those are the swing states most people have been talking about. I'm going to switch over to Nevada, which is the other swing state that of the 7 that most pollsters are talking about. I no longer believe that Nevada is a swing state. I believe it's going to go to Trump, and by a likely margin. It's probably going to go by 3 to 5 percentage points. Nevada is notoriously hard to poll. However, there has never been a poll that shows Trump ahead in 2016 or 2020. He has been consistently ahead by 3 to 5 points in every poll in Nevada for months now. And if we exclude Morning Consult and Quinnipiac, he's up even more. But what's more, how do we say, more comforting for Republicans is that normally Clark County in Nevada, which casts a majority of the votes in Nevada, usually has an early vote lead for Democrats that is in the 100 to 200,000 vote range. That gives them a comfortable margin to overcome the overwhelmingly, and I'm talking 75 to 90% margin that Trump scores in 16 of the other remaining 17 counties in Nevada. Those rural counties They may be small votes, but they are overwhelmingly for Trump. And then we have Washoe County, where Reno is at, which is swingy, but has been moving in a Democratic direction in the last few elections until the last election. It moved to the right, still voted Democrat, but to the right. Here's the news, though. In the early vote returns, Republicans are winning in every single county when it comes to the early vote turnout by registration. This is significant. This has never happened in Nevada history. Right now, when I checked earlier today, Clark County in Nevada had a 14,000 vote early vote registration by party advantage for Republicans over Democrats. That is unheard of. It's unprecedented. There's also the largest turnout that we've seen in the state in a very long time. So on election day, we're going to see a massive Republican vote because that's just normally what happens. But the fact that they don't have this firewall now in Clark County early voting is going to mean that Nevada will vote for the Republican candidate. This has not happened since George W. Bush carried it in 2004. So now I'm going to move to the more states that are more going to be more, how do we say, controversial. And this is where most people are going to say, you're crazy. But I'm not crazy because the polling is showing it, the demographic shifts are showing it, and I think this is very likely to happen. I believe that there are now going to be 5 additional swing states, and those are New Mexico, Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire, and Maine. So we're going to start with New Mexico. So New Mexico is probably going to be the second most difficult before Maine for Trump to win. However, the Hispanic vote is going heavily Republican nationwide. It is just shifting in dramatic numbers. Now, Trump is not going to capture a majority of the Latino vote. He may capture a majority, though, of the Latino male vote, but he's not going to capture the overall Latino vote. However, in New Mexico, Latinos are the majority. So if he is able to pull off 40 to 45% of the Latino vote in New Mexico, he will carry New Mexico. Even though there are many, many white liberals in New Mexico, particularly in the Santa Fe, Teos, and Albuquerque areas, there's also a lot of rural whites that are going to vote overwhelmingly Republican. And the vote is going to be depressed in some of these areas because inflation affects everyone. Everyone has to go to the grocery store. And New Mexico is one of the poorest states in the country. So people here are more affected by inflation than elsewhere. So the grocery bills, the utility bills, they add up for Hispanics, for whites. So you're going to see not a Trump victory in places like Albuquerque and Santa Fe and Teos, but you're going to see an increased margin. That will allow the rural areas, which are going to go overwhelmingly Republican, to overtake the Democratic vote. So I believe that right now, New Mexico is a tilt Republican state. So I believe it's going to go to Trump. Let's move on to Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is the one that everybody says I'm nuts on. But here's why I believe that there is going to be a Republican victory here, despite the fact that Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota and is on the ticket with Kamala Harris as her running mate. Minnesota has been trending Republican in its rural counties, particularly in what they call the Iron Mode area. Now, we have many congressional districts that once were solidly Democrat that have moved into the Republican area. Now, of course, this is usually overwhelmed by the overwhelming vote out of Minneapolis-St. Paul area, as well as Brooklyn Park. However, these areas are not going to turn out for Kamala Harris like they did for Joe Biden, and like they did for Barack Obama, or like they did for even John Kerry. And the reason being is that crime is out of control in these areas. And who was at the helm during this? It was Tim Walz. And that is why I believe that her actually picking Tim Walz does not help her in Minnesota. I believe it actually hurts her. I believe the suburban areas around Minneapolis, St. Paul, and around Brooklyn Park are going to go more Republican than they have in the past. I do not believe they're going to be carried by Trump. However, I believe his margin is going to increase by as much as 5 to 10 points. That will be just enough to carry Minnesota by about 25 to 30,000 votes. It will be the first time since, I believe, Nixon carried it in 1972. So this has been the most consistently Democratic state in the entire nation, but I believe that Trump will carry Minnesota. We're then going to go to what I think is actually a very likely Trump victory in Virginia. We had a poll come out where Kamala Harris has dropped her lead from 14 points to just 3 points in Virginia, well within the margin of error. And it was by, I believe, Atlas Intel or Emerson, one of the more reputable polls, whereas the 13-point poll, I believe, is by Morning Consult, which is a garbage polling firm. You also have to look at the trends. So you had Governor Youngkin in Virginia won very comfortably last time around. You also have a legislature which is very evenly divided, and you have people hurting again, and you have a rightward trend in the southwest corner, Hampton Roads area of Virginia. Northern Virginia continues to grow and continues to be government workers, mostly highly educated and mostly Democrat. I don't believe that Trump has much of a chance to win over many of these voters. However, I do believe that the Hampton Roads area, Virginia Beach, Suffolk, Chesapeake, these are going to lean more towards Trump this time, just enough so that Trump is probably going to carry Virginia by about a 50,000 vote margin. Now let's move to the next state that I believe is going to flip, and that is New Hampshire. New Hampshire is one that everybody said was off the map for Trump. He lost it by a significant margin in 2020. I believe it was 7 or 8 points. That's not going to happen this time. And the reason that's not going to happen is because registration in New Hampshire has changed dramatically since 2020. In every single county in New Hampshire, Republican new registration or switching from Democrat to Republican has increased significantly. And we had a poll released just 2 days ago that showed Trump ahead in New Hampshire 51 to 49. This is very significant. And when you look at the overall national polling showing Trump now in the lead in most polls, if you discount the Morning Consult and Quinnipiac polls, he's up by even more, probably 2 to 3%. New Hampshire is going to go Republican. When you're looking on election night, look for the margin in Belknap County. That is going to be a swing county. If you see a significant Trump victory in Belknap County, he's going to win New Hampshire. We're now going to move to the last state, which I'm not as confident here, and that is Maine. Now, Maine's first congressional district is going to go overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. It's a very liberal area. It's the southeastern portion of the state. It has areas such as Bangor, and you've got Portland, very liberal areas. They're not going to move in any significant way towards Trump. Actually, they may move in the exact opposite way. I believe Kamala will probably carry that congressional district. Maine is one of 2 states, along with Nebraska, that separates their electoral votes, 1 for each congressional district. They have 2, and then 2 for the at-large. I believe Kamala will carry the first district by between 12 and 13 points. However, the second district is going to be the opposite case. Now, it voted very strongly for Trump in both 2016 and 2020, but in 2020 it was a little less. It's much more rural. It's much more conservative. However, it is suffering. There's actually been a loss of population And I believe actually their congressperson, Representative Golden, is going to lose to the Republican challenger there because people are that angry with this administration. That this county's margin is what's going to, this congressional district's margin, the second congressional district, is what's going to decide the election for overall in Maine. I believe that it is possible for Trump to carry it between 17 and 20 points. If he does so, that is enough to dwarf the 12 to 13% margin in Maine, first congressional district, to eke out an overall victory in Maine of maybe 7,000 to 8,000 votes. It's going to be extremely close. This one's just basically a gut feeling because Maine can go either way at large. The congressional districts are set. You're definitely going to have Kamala winning the first. You're definitely going to have Trump winning the second. It's just going to be the margin of victory in the second that's going to determine the overall vote in Maine. So that's the map. I have several states that I think are going to be much closer this time than they were before, but they're still going to stay where they were. That includes Rhode Island, New Jersey, New York, and Oregon, which I believe are going to have a massive right-wing shift because they have a massive working class voter base. There's also the crime wave in New York that citizens are just sick of. So I believe you're going to see areas like Queens and Brooklyn swing more towards the Republicans than they have in the past, but not overwhelmingly so. And I also believe that New Jersey is also going to move to the right because of some factors locally, but that will be it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Uncensored. If you like what you've heard and you're on YouTube, please subscribe. If you like what you heard and you're on Facebook, please follow my Facebook page. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, Pandora, or somewhere else, please make sure to subscribe. So you all have a great day, and we will talk to you on the next episode.